If a town disappears, what's the last thing that's left behind? In Florida, sometimes it isn't houses at all. It's a cemetery swallowed by the woods, a foundation so low you have to crouch to notice it, or a brick road that runs straight and then just ends, like someone snapped the map in half. Today I'm taking you through 11 ghost towns in Florida, and each one feels like a scene cut from a film reel, leaving only a few frames and a question nobody can quite answer. Some places got rich on timber and then went dark like a switch. Some were county seats for less than 2 years before they were overthrown. And number one, I'll only say this, it didn't just die. It got lifted from its original spot, like Florida wanted it hidden for good. Number 11, Muscogee. Number 11 is Muscogee, and I'm going to start where the town ends. You walk into the woods near the Perdido River, and the first thing that hits you isn't a ruined main street or a leaning saloon, it's a cemetery. Headstones half hidden by brush. Some broken, some missing, some so deep in the trees it feels like the forest is trying to keep them private. Locals even gave it a nickname that tells you everything about how hard life could be out here, the baby cemetery. And it messes with your head because you can feel a whole town behind these graves, even when you can't see it. Here's the twist. Muscogee wasn't a cute ghost town. It was a company town built to eat the forest. Founded back in 1857, it grew into a lumber machine, especially after Southern States Land and Lumber took over in 1889. At its peak, this place had 4 mills, a rail depot, a school, a post office, the whole setup. They laid around 50 miles of logging railroad, ran 5 locomotives and about 70 cars, and used the river like a conveyor belt. Logs floated in booms, tugboats nudged them into place, and the mills chewed through timber like it would never end. In some years, they pushed out something like 60 million board feet of lumber. That's not a town. That's a heartbeat made of saw blades. But Florida always has fine print. Around 1917 to 1918, storms hammered what timber was left, and tension rose when workers were paid in company scrip and started pushing back. Then the long fade began. By the late 1920s, the company was liquidating. The whole place was sold off with thousands of acres, and a few hundred people left were basically watching the lights go out for good. By the late 1930s, much of Muscogee was dismantled and hauled away. Today, the land is public to explore in the Perdido River area, but Muscogee's loudest survivor is still that cemetery, holding the story for the people who didn't get to leave cleanly. And if you think a town disappearing into trees is eerie, the next place shows what happens when Florida lets the water do the erasing. Number 10, Pine Level. Number 10 is Pine Level, and this one feels like a town that lost an election and never recovered. If you drive rural DeSoto County today, you do not find a ghost main street. You find a marker, a couple of cemeteries, and a silence that feels way too big for how little you can see. That is the punchline. Pine Level was not small once. For a short moment, it ran the county. In 1866, Pine Level was picked as the county seat for Manatee County. Then in 1887, when DeSoto County was created, Pine Level got crowned again as the first county seat. That meant court business, paperwork, and foot traffic. Stores popped up because people had to come here. Then the crown slipped. On November 6, 1888, the county seat moved to Arcadia. No fire, no flood, just a vote, and the money followed the vote. When the courthouse traffic left, Pine Level started bleeding out. It tried to breathe again in the railroad era. A line nearly 50 miles long opened on May 3, 1915, running from Bradenton to Arcadia. Pine Level sat about 41 miles from Bradenton. It had a depot, a siding about 1,348 feet long, and a spur about 524 feet long feeding a big sawmill. For a while, that kept the place alive. But Florida always has fine print. In 1933, the tract was approved for abandonment, and most of it happened in September 1934. By the late 1930s, a Florida guide listed Pine Level's population at 30. 30, that is not a town. That is a handful of people watching the lights go out. When I think about Pine Level, I do not think about ruins. I think about how fast important can turn into forgotten. And the next place proves Florida does not only erase towns with paperwork, sometimes it uses water. Number 9. Ellaville. Number 9 is Ellaville, and the easiest way to understand it is to stand where two rivers meet and just listen. Right here, the Suwannee and the Withlacoochee slide together like they are making a deal. The water looks calm, almost polite, but this spot has a history of reminding people who is really in charge. Ellaville tried to build a town on that handshake. Back in the mid-1860s, a man named George F. Drew set up a sawmill and manufacturing complex here, built around yellow pine. For a while it worked. Ellaville grew into a real little place, a few hundred people, the kind of town that wakes up to the sound of work, not the sound of tourists. And Drew did not just build a mill. In the late 1860s, he built a mansion, the kind of house that screams confidence. Later, he even became Florida's governor in the late 1870s. So why does it feel like Ellaville barely exists now? Because this town had two timers counting down at once. After 1900, the boom started slipping. Timber does not last forever, and by the 1920s, locals talk about the good pine getting tapped out. Then you add the second timer, floods. When you live at a river confluence, you are basically renting the land from water, and the rent can spike without warning. Here is the detail that hits hardest. Ellaville did not end with a headline. It ended with a mailbox. In 1942, the post office closed and the town officially stopped being a town. The mansion lingered, falling apart through the 1950s until it burned around 1970. Today you can find a marker, and if you look close, faint foundation outlines and pieces of burned limestone hiding in the trees. Ellaville is not a ghost town that shows off. It is a ghost town that whispers. And the next place proves Florida can erase a town even faster when the ocean decides it wants the last word. Number 8. Indian Key. Number 8 is Indian Key, and it does not feel like a place you visit. It feels like a place you sneak up on. You do not drive here. You come by water. 1 mile off the Keys, this little speck of land sits so close to the highway that you can almost hear the traffic, but the moment you step onto the shore, it is like somebody muted the world. Just heat, salt, and rock. And then you notice something weird. The limestone has these little pockets, like tiny bowls. When the tide drops, small sea life can get stranded in them, waiting for the water to come back and set them free. That is when it hits me. This island has a habit of holding things in place. Not just shells and seawater, history. Because Indian Key was not always quiet. It was only about 11 acres, but in the 1830s it was loud with business. People made money here from wrecking, salvaging cargo from ships that did not survive the reef. The guy everyone circles back to is Jacob Hausman, the so-called Wrecker King. He poured serious money into building this place up, ran a store that pulled in real cash, and Indian Key got official fast. Customs, a post office, the whole deal. Here's the part that still feels like a joke with a straight face. In 1836, this tiny island became the county seat of Dade County. Imagine that, a handful of buildings on a rock in the ocean, acting like the center of government. Then the spell broke. In 1840, during the Seminole War era, the island was hit in a sudden attack. People fled, buildings burned, the place never fully recovered. A few years later, the county seat moved back to the mainland, and in 1846, a massive hurricane finished what was already falling apart. Today, it is a historic state park. You walk a faint grid where streets used to be. Foundations sit low in the brush. It is not a ghost town with walls. It is a ghost town with footprints. And the next place makes this feel gentle because it is not the ocean that takes it. It is the ocean that keeps taking it. Number 7. Yukon number 7 is Yukon. And if you live in Jacksonville, there is a real chance you have been here without realizing it. because today it looks like a normal park. Trees, trails, joggers, people walking dogs. But keep walking, and you start noticing little glitches like the forest is accidentally showing you what used to be underneath. A stretch of sidewalk that makes no sense. A curve that feels like it was meant for cars. Then you hit the strangest clue of all. An old brick road about 16 feet wide, still sitting there like it is waiting for traffic that never comes. Here is the part that gets me. Yukon did not die because it ran out of money or got wiped out by a hurricane. It got shut down because of the sky. This land goes way back. In the late 1700s, it starts as a Spanish-era land grant at Black Point, later turning into Mulberry Grove Plantation, shipping crops by steamboat on the St. Johns River. After the Civil War, pieces of land were sold to formerly enslaved people, and a community formed here before Yukon was even a name. Then World War I hits, Camp Joseph E. Johnston grows nearby, and Yukon becomes a real town. There was even a streetcar line that could take you toward Jacksonville through places like Ortega and Riverside. Imagine that, a ghost town that once had a commute. By the mid-1900s, Yukon had paved roads, sidewalks, a little downtown, a railroad depot, and a neighborhood called Dewey Park with around 300 homes. It was not a myth, it was a normal place. Then in 1939, the Navy buys up land for Naval Air Station Jacksonville. And in July 1963, Yukon is closed for flight safety. One decision and a whole town gets told to pack up. Now it is Tilly K. Fowler Regional Park with miles of trails. People come for a peaceful walk and end up stepping on the bones of a town that was erased so pilots could fly safer overhead. And next, we leave the city behind because the next place proves Florida can hide a ghost town in plain sight with nothing but distance and silence. Number 6. St. Joseph. Number 6 is St. Joseph, and this one messes with me because it leaves you two souvenirs that do not match. Souvenir 1 is a monument, a straight-faced reminder that in 1838 and early 1839, people gathered here to hammer out Florida's first constitution, like this was a permanent, important city. Souvenir 2 is the cemetery, quiet, fenced, and heavy. A place that basically whispers, yeah, about that permanent part. St. Joseph showed up fast. Around 1835, it popped onto St. Joseph Bay as a port boomtown, the kind of place that smells like fresh lumber and big promises. In just a couple of years, it swelled into one of the largest communities in Florida for that era, with thousands of people cycling through. You can almost picture it. Ships in the bay, warehouses, busy streets, everyone acting like the future is already signed and sealed. But Florida always has a second story running underneath the first. In 1841, yellow fever tore through, not a little scare either, the kind of outbreak that makes people stop shaking hands, stop gathering, stop believing the water and the air are harmless. Some accounts describe the impact as overwhelming, like the town simply could not absorb it. And once the confidence breaks in a port town, it breaks everywhere. Families leave, business dries up, the loud parts go quiet. Then comes the final shove. By 1844, a hurricane and storm surge hit a place that was already half empty, and the coast did what coasts do. It took what was left. Here is the plot twist I did not expect the first time I heard this story. St. Joseph did not just collapse. It got dismantled. People reportedly pulled buildings apart and moved the materials to other towns, especially Apalachicola. So in a weird way, St. Joseph did not vanish. It got recycled. Today, you can visit the state park and see the story told through exhibits. But the strangest feeling is realizing a city that once hosted a Constitution convention can leave behind mostly sand, memory, and a cemetery that still holds the weight. And next, we go to a place where Florida does not dismantle the town. Florida just lets the shoreline keep chewing. Number 5. Chetwynd number 5 is Chetwynd, and it starts with a moment that feels like you took a wrong turn and ended up in rural England. You are on Spring Lake Road, just north of Fruitland Park, and there it is, a little wooden church in that old Carpenter Gothic style. Sharp roof lines, quiet charm. The kind of place you would expect to see surrounded by fog and stone walls. Then you spot the detail that really makes you blink. A lich gate. That classic English churchyard gate. The kind Florida almost never has. And now you are stuck with the obvious question, why is this here? Because Chetwynd was supposed to be a British citrus dream. Back in 1883, a young English organizer named Granville Chetwynd Stapleton helped pull together a small colony here. Florida was in its orange fever era, land looked cheap, the future looked sweet. By 1886, a group of young English men working citrus groves started forming what would become Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. Before the building was even finished, they held services in a barn near Lake Geneva, right between Fruitland Park and Chetwynd. I love that image. A bunch of newcomers in a barn dressed up on a Sunday, acting like they could build a whole hometown from scratch. In December 1888, the church officially opened. In 1889, they added that lich gate, like they were planting a flag that said, "We are staying." And then Florida showed them the fine print. The freezes of 1894 and 1895 hit like two punches. Citrus groves collapsed. Lake County was said to lose about 99% of its citrus trees. When the trees went, the money went. When the money went, so did people. Chetwynd faded until the town itself was basically gone. Here is the small twist that makes this place stick with me. The town disappears, but the church does not. There is even an old postcard from around 1900 that feels like proof it was real. So if you ever want to see what a ghost town looks like when the only survivor is faith in timber, Chetwynd is it. And next, we leave the cold behind, because the next place gets erased by a very different kind of Florida force. Number 4. Port Leon. Number 4 is Port Leon, and it comes with the most Florida sentence ever written on a real estate pitch. They sold this place as high and beautiful, safe from even the highest tides. If you have ever watched Florida Water Ignore Confidence, you already know where this is going. Port Leon sat on Appalachia Bay as a cotton port, basically the coastal loading dock for Tallahassee. In the late 1830s, they started selling lots and pushing development hard. The Tallahassee to St. Mark's Railroad had opened in 1836, and by 1839, a drawbridge helped extend the rail connection closer so cargo could move faster. By 1840, Port Leon had a post office. By 1841, it was incorporated, trying to act like a grown-up city. It even lived through a yellow fever scare that same year. Here is the part that makes the fall feel personal. In March of 1843, Port Leon was chosen as the seat of the brand new Wakulla County. Imagine the mood. People thinking, we did it. We are official now. We are not a risky little port. We are the center. And then 6 months later, on September 13th, 1843, a hurricane hit with storm surge around 10 feet. 10 feet. The kind of number you cannot talk your way out of. The town was smashed. Warehouses, wharves, businesses, homes, gone. People did what people always do after a lesson like that. They moved inland and started over as Newport. At its peak, Port Leon had a few hundred residents, around 8 to 10 businesses, warehouses, a hotel, 2 taverns, even a newspaper, and an annual fair. Cotton moved through here in huge volume, tens of thousands of bales a year. It was busy enough to feel permanent. Here is the small twist that sticks in my head. After the storm, the bridge was destroyed, but for years people could still row boats around the old bridge pilings left behind. Like the city was gone, but the skeleton of its ambition kept poking out of the water. Today you can walk trails in the Saint, Mark's Refuge, and see markers that show just how high that 1843 surge reached. And it makes you realize Port Leon was not abandoned, it was corrected. And next we head to a place where Florida does not correct a town with one storm, but with something slower and colder. Number 3, Sumica. Number 3 is Sumica, and the first thing I want you to notice is the name. It does not sound like a town. It sounds like a code, and that is basically what it was. Sumica was a company town named after the company behind it, built to turn pine forest into cash. When you hear a place has a name like that, you already know it was never meant to last. If you stand near SR 60 around the Lake Wales area today, you are not going to see a downtown. What you can find is a historic marker, and if you walk the trails, you start following a raised strip of ground that sits about 6 feet higher than the land around it. That is the old railroad grade. It is the path that used to carry this town's whole purpose in and out, like a belt on a machine. Sumica became official enough to get a post office on March 19, 1917. At its height, it had around 50 houses, a commissary company store, a church, and a school. It even had its own money. Not real cash, but company scrip. Little pieces like 5-cent and 25-cent notes that you could spend at the company store. Imagine that feeling. You work all day in the pine woods and your paycheck only makes sense in one building. The operation was not small. By 1922, the sawmill was cutting about 35,000 feet of lumber per day, and they had pushed roughly 4 miles of logging track deeper into the forest. Everything about this place ran on rails and resin, lumber, and turpentine. Then the forest ran out. In June 1927, the post office closed and Sumica was abandoned. No dramatic battle, no single hurricane headline, just the plug getting pulled when the timber was gone. The twist is how clean it feels. The economy disappears so fast that even the money becomes useless overnight. Today, the town is basically a footprint, scattered foundations, a trail that follows a railroad to nowhere, and a conservation area of about 4,000 acres around Lake Wyohayakapka that quietly swallowed the rest. And next, we go from a town with its own money to a town that lost everything to water that does not care about borders. Number 2, Eldora. Number 2 is Eldora, and it feels less like a ghost town and more like a place the world quietly walked past. You get into Canaveral National Seashore and everything turns soft. Live oaks, shade, that flat Florida light. Then you look out over Mosquito Lagoon and it hits you why this spot mattered. Before highways and resorts, water was the road. If a boat stopped here, your whole week changed. In the late 1800s, Eldora was not empty at all. In the 1890s, there were more than 100 people here. They had a school. They had a post office. Steamboats ran the waterway, dropping off supplies and picking up produce. Like this was a normal working little town, and the details make it feel real. Oh, mail came 3 days a week. The school had around 15 students. There were about 11 citrus farms, 6 bee yards, 3 vegetable farms, and a handful of homesteads with their own docks where boats could pull up and load out honey and fruit. That is not a myth. That is a routine. Here is the twist that makes me stare at the lagoon a little longer. Eldora used to go by a different name when the first post office was approved. It was called Fairview. That is such an innocent name for a place that was about to get hit with Florida reality, because Eldora had bad timing. The great freezes of 1894 and 1895 slammed citrus across this region, and that was a direct punch to the town's main income. Then the second punch was quieter but worse. When the Florida East Coast Railway finished through the area in 1896, travel patterns shifted. River and lagoon stops lost importance. Eldora did not get destroyed in a single night. It just got bypassed. Over time, it changed from an agricultural stop to a winter retreat and gentlemen's farming, then slowly thinned out again as tastes changed and services moved away. By the time the seashore became protected land, Eldora was already fading. One house still anchors the whole story. The old Eldora State House, built around 1913, once sat so abandoned that a tree actually grew through it until people came back and restored it. So when you walk that short trail to the pier today, it is not ruins screaming for attention. It is a quiet place asking one question: how many towns disappear without anyone noticing? And the next town answers in the loudest Florida way possible, with a storm. Number 1, Atsena Otie Key. Number 1 is Atsena Otie Key, and if you want the cleanest proof that Florida can move a town, not just destroy it, this is it. Most people think Cedar Key has always been Cedar Key, but the original town sat out here about half a mile offshore. You only reach it by boat or kayak, and today it is part of a wildlife refuge, so the island feels like it is being held in a quiet, protective grip. No traffic, no stores, just wind, water, and that strange feeling you get when a place is important but not allowed to be busy anymore. The story starts deeper than the town itself. This island has signs of human life going back thousands of years. You can even find shell middens, basically ancient piles of oyster and clam shells, like a fossil record of people who lived off this water long before any Florida existed. Then the island becomes useful in a different way. During the Second Seminole War, it was called Depot Key and served as a supply hub. The Army even ordered a hospital built in 1840 until a hurricane in October 1842 tore the place up and pushed them out. By 1845, it had a post office. In 1858, Florida officially chartered the town. Around 1860, more than 200 people lived here, with docks and warehouses. After the Civil War, the economy roared back on one very specific product: red cedar, the kind used for pencil slats. A big mill operation set up shop, and by 1895, there were over 50 households on the island. And then comes the moment everything changes. In late September 1896, a hurricane hit the Cedar Keys with storm surge measured around 10.5 feet. 10.5 feet, reports describe Atsena Otie taking a direct beating, with buildings damaged or destroyed across the island. The wider Cedar Keys area lost dozens of lives. Here is the twist that makes this story stick in my throat. People did not just abandon Atsena Otie. Some buildings were literally floated over to Waikiki. The town did not just die, it relocated. The center of Cedar Key shifted, and this island became the before picture. Today you can walk a trail, see remnants of the old mill, and visit the Atsena Otie Cemetery, with markers dating back to the 1800s. And standing there, it is hard not to feel like Florida did not erase a town. Florida simply picked it up and set it down somewhere else. If there's one thing Florida teaches you through these ghost towns, it's that nothing here is permanent. Not land, not money, not even a whole community's address. Some places got erased by cold snaps, some by paperwork, some by a storm surge that didn't care what year it was, and a few didn't really die so much as they slipped sideways, across a bay, into a park, into a wildlife refuge, until history became something you can only reach by trail or kayak. These towns are not just ruins, they're warnings. The next ghost town might be forming right now while the lights are still on.